Hello, I'm Boris, and it's both my honor and privilege to reach out to you through this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about poverty in Africa and the root cause of poverty in Africa beyond what you can expect. Also, I'll talk about the CFA currency and the dollar. The African continent is no doubt the most resource-abundant continent, and yet its people live in extreme poverty. Many Africans lack access or do not have access to enough basic needs such as food, clothing, housing, education, transportation, electricity, water, medicals, health insurance, security. Not to mention that many African countries are confronted permanently with instability such as post-elections conflicts or violence, terrorism, and so many forms of violence due to the types of autocratic and authoritarian regimes in place in Africa. As a result, millions of Africans migrate to Europe, trying to flee from extreme poverty and warfare at home in the attempt to desperately enter the elusive Europeans' El Dorado. Now, while this political and socio-economic contrast might be attributed to, according to me, the authoritarian and autocratic regimes that confiscates all the resources, all the riches, poverty in Africa at large and in the world must be attributed to the unfair and corrupt monetary and financial system. In this video, I want to talk about the US dollar, just as I mentioned, and the CFA franc, which is to me the most corrupted and wicked currencies that plunder the global economy at large. Check out the details. In order to help you grasp the concept of petrodollar and how the US dollar came to be the most dominant and exploiting currency in the world, let me first explain to you the concept of gold standard in the global economy and monetary system. From AD 70 up until 1970, the global economy used to run on a system where a country's currency value was directly attached to the amount of gold and the quantity of gold, the value of gold they had. This is known as the gold standard system. With a gold standard system, a country would agree to convert paper money into a fixed amount of gold. In practice, a country's central bank would agree to buy or sell gold at a fixed price, at a fixed amount of money, which in practice means that a country would not cannot print more money unless they had the equivalent or the corresponding amount of gold. You must have heard of the Bretton Woods institutions. When in finance or economics you hear of the Bretton Woods institutions, it refers to the institutions such as the IMF, the International Monetary Funds, and the IBERD, which is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. These are institutions brought about by the Bretton Woods Hampshire Conference that took place back in 1944 at which 44 allied countries took part, as there was a request for a new financial institutions to which everybody would comply with. How so? Well, during World War II, the United States, before entering the war, were the main supplier, the sole supplier of military equipments and other necessary goods. And therefore, in return, European countries paid them using their gold reserves. The United States eventually became the owner of most gold in the world, making the return of the gold standard system impossible for most European countries who have exhausted their reserves of gold. Therefore, in 1994, those countries met at the conference in order to decide about a new economic order, a new economic system to which everybody would comply with. Under this new system brought about by the Bretton Woods institutions, gold became the reference, the standard, the basis for the US dollar only, and the other currencies were pegged, which means linked to the value of US dollar. In other words, a country's currency value was determined by the value of the US dollar. Thanks to the Bretton Woods institutions, the US dollar was officially crowned the world reserve currency, backed by the world's largest gold reserves. So the system prevailed until it was replaced in the early 1970s by a new system widely known as the petrodollar. The petrodollar is a system wherein initially all the Middle East oil producing countries came to an agreement with the United States that the crude oil price was to be set in US dollar. So the practice or system went on to include all the oil exporting countries or oil producing countries, for example, Africa. If they wanted to sell their oil in the international markets, they had to agree to use the dollar as the only exchange or only currency. Okay, this is where I consider the US dollar to be one of the most wicked currency, because it's exploiting and using other economies and taking advantage of other economies. This system provides a significant number of advantages to the US economy. For example, it creates an increase in demand for the US dollar because many countries, instead of gold reserves, accumulates reserves for the US dollar. The demand for the US Treasury securities also increased, as many countries consider them to be the safe way to store their reserve for US dollar. This provides, therefore, a means of finance to the US government to finance its budget deficits. In other words, when you float a US Treasury bill, it's an instrument, it's a means of debts that they create that allows them to raise money in order to finance their budget or to finance any need that they may have. That's why this system is very wicked, because they prey on other economies by using their finance, their resources, simply by printing out significant amount of dollars and creating debts for these countries. Okay, so that's all for now. That's all I can say about the US dollar.